Hello and welcome to Japanese Wrestling with the Maritime Warrior. On episode 10, I bring you WAR, Wrestling and Romance. WAR, or War as it was often known as, was a unique and interesting promotion from the 1990s. After SWS Super World of Sports closed its doors in 1992, Genichiro Tenryu would start up War that same year. War throughout the years would have a lot of partnerships with different promotions like New Japan Pro Wrestling, FMW, Tokyo Pro, UWFI, and even the WWF. In the early days of War, you would see such wrestlers as the Great Kabuki, Samson Fuyuki, Ultimo Dragon, Ashura Hara, Takashi Ishikawa, Masao Orihara, Yuji Yasuraoka, and even Kerry Von Erich. War's first real big show would take place on September 15th, 1992, when they would partner up with the WWF. This card would see such matches as Chavo Guerrero Sr. and Paul Diamond beat Nobukazu Hirai and Yoshiro Ito. Also, Masashi Aoyagi would beat Masao Orihara. Ultimo Dragon would beat Negro Casas. The Anti-Players Association would beat Samson Fuyuki and Tatsumi Kitahara. The Anti-Player Association would be huge in the main event scene in the early to mid-90s in War. Also on that card, the Great Kabuki beat Takashi Ishikawa. Originally supposed to be a tag team match between the Legion of Doom, Hawk and Animal, versus the Beverly Brothers, would be turned into a handicap match as Hawk had quit the WWF not long before that. This match saw Road Warrior Animal get an injury that would halt his career for a few years. Also on this card, The Undertaker would beat King Haku. And in the main event, in a best 2 out of 3 falls match, Genichiro Tenryu would challenge Ric Flair for the WWF World Heavyweight title. Both men would get a pinfall over each other, but the third fall ended in a double countout. Ric Flair keeps the belt. The partnership with the WWF would continue in the following months. Wrestlers from the WWF that would tour with War would include Haku, Koko Beware, The Berserker, and Owen Hart. Going into 1993, Genichiro Tenryu and his partners are locked in a feud with the Anti-Players Association. The Anti-Players Association was a stable comprised of Shiro Koshinaka, Kengo Kimura, Kuniaki Kobayashi, Masashi Aoyagi, and Akitoshi Saito. One of the big rising junior heavyweight stars competing in War at this time is Ultimo Dragon. He was getting his start here and would only get bigger with time. Also in War in 1993 was John Tenta. The former Earthquake had just left the WWF not long before joining War. John Tenta would team with Tenryu and main event some shows in 1993. Two big New Japan stars that made appearances in 1993 were Riki Choshu and Shinya Hashimoto. Ryo, Lord of the Jungle, was also touring with War in 1993. This is the future Renegade, the Ultimate Warrior ripoff from WCW. The Ultimo Dragon would bring in a championship belt to War. This was the UWA World Middleweight Championship. He would actually successfully defend this title on April 5th versus Blue Demon Jr., but would lose that same title the following month to New Japan Pro Wrestling's El Samurai. 4 days after that, Ultimo Dragon would win back the UWA World Middleweight title. The first anniversary show would take place and would see a main event of Genichiro Tenryu beating New Japan Pro Wrestling's Shinya Hashimoto. Also on the anniversary show, we would see the Great Muta beat Ashura Hara and Masahiro Chono beat Koki Kitahara. Having New Japan stars come in and help out War like this was a big get for Genichiro Tenryu. In July of 1993, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, the Rock and Roll Express, would start touring with War. On the final day of the Winning War 93 tour, Genichiro Tenryu would beat Masahiro Chono in the main event. On the last show of the year, Ultimo Dragon would successfully defend the UWA World Middleweight title versus Atlantis, and in the main event, we would see Genichiro Tenryu beat Tatsumi Fujinami. One of the first shows of the year in 1994, we would see a title change, as Isshin Riki would win the UWA World Middleweight Championship from Ultimo Dragon. In 1994, FMW and Michinoku Pro Wrestling stars would start working in War. On a card in March, Tarzan Goto and Atsushi Onita, representing FMW, would beat Genichiro Tenryu and Ashura Hara. On that same card, Michinoku Pro's Sato, this is the future Dick Togo, and the Great Sasuke would lose to Masao Orihara and Ultimo Dragon. Also on that card, Lionheart, Chris Jericho, Mr. Hughes, and former Yokozuna in sumo wrestling, Koji Kitao. Kitao's name in sumo wrestling was Futa Haguro and was kicked out of sumo, and had also been involved in a shoot incident in the old SWS promotion with John Tenta. Samson Fuyuki, who is now going by the name of Hiromichi Fuyuki, is getting a bit of a push in 1994, main eventing shows in singles matches and getting big wins over Ashura Hara and Masanobu Kurisu. He would also start teaming up with Jado and Gedo. The three men would form the stable Fuyuki-gun. One of Fuyuki-gun's first big wins would be in a trios match versus Genichiro Tenryu, Koki Kitahara, and Takashi Ishikawa. One of the big draws for War was their exciting six-man tag team matches. So when it was time to introduce a new championship belt, the decision was made to not have a singles title, but a War World six-man tag team title. On June 30th, history would be made. In a one-night tournament, they would crown the first ever War World six-man tag team champions. In the first round, Fuyuki-gun would beat the team of Hideo Takayama, Hiroshi Itakura, and Ichiro Yaguchi. Ashura Hara, Super Strong Machine, and Arashi would go to a time limit draw with Brett Como, Dos Caras, and Lionheart. Masao Orihara, Shiryu, and the Great Sasuke would beat Isshin Riki, Masanobu Kurisu, and Takashi Ishikawa. And in the final first-round matchup, Genichiro Tenryu, Animal Hamaguchi, and Koki Kitahara would beat the team of Kendo Nagasaki, Kishin Kawabata, and Ryo Miyake. In the semifinals, Fuyuki-gun beat the team of Brett Como, Dos Caras, and Lionheart, and Genichiro Tenryu, Animal Hamaguchi, and Koki Kitahara beat the team of Masao Orihara, Shiryu, and the Great Sasuke. The finals would be set in the main event. Fuyuki-gun would beat Genichiro Tenryu, Animal Hamaguchi, and Koki Kitahara to be crowned the first ever War World Six-Man Tag Team Champions. The War World Six-Man Tag Team Championships is what made War feel different from the other promotions. It's very ambitious to go with a tag title instead of a singles title. By July, Ultimo Dragon had won back the UWA World Middleweight title, and he would successfully defend that title versus the Great Sasuke. On this same card, the Super Battle of Six Men would take place. This was another one-night tournament. The finals would see Genichiro Tenryu, Atsushi Onita, and Crusher Bam Bam Bigelow beat the team of Ashura Hara, Jinsei Shinzaki, and John Tenta. In August, Fuyuki-gun would have their first title defense, but it would be an unsuccessful title defense as they would lose the titles to Bob Backlund, Scott Putski, and the Warlord. Ultimo Dragon would have another successful title defense of the UWA World Middleweight title, defending versus rising star Yuji Yasuraoka. After being champions for only 6 days, Backlund, Putski, and Warlord would drop the six-man titles back to Fuyuki-gun. On September 29th, Hiromichi Fuyuki would be in the main event versus Genichiro Tenryu in a hair versus hair match. Tenryu would get the win. In October, Fuyuki-gun would have their first successful title defense versus Bob Backlund, Dos Caras, and Vampiro Casanova. In November, Lionheart would successfully defend the NWA World Middleweight title versus Ultimo Dragon. The very next night, a rematch between Lionheart and Ultimo Dragon would take place, but this time both the NWA and UWA World Middleweight titles would be on the line. This time, the Ultimo Dragon would come out on top and be crowned double champion. That same night, in the main event, Fuyuki-gun would make their second defense of the War 6-man tag team titles, beating Genichiro Tenryu, Animal Hamaguchi, and Koki Kitahara. In December of 1994, Fuyuki-gun would make a third successful title defense versus the team of Heisei Ishin-gun. This was Akatoshi Saito, Kengo Kimura, and Tatsutoshi Goto. 1995 would start off with Ultimo Dragon successfully defending the NWA World Middleweight title versus Lionheart. In January, we would see the crowning of a new War 6-man tag team champion. This was Heisei Ishin-gun, represented by Michiyoshi Ohara, Tatsutoshi Goto, and Shiro Koshinaka, who defeated Fuyuki-gun. In February, Ultimo Dragon would once again successfully defend the NWA World Middleweight title versus Jason Cross. In March, Heisei Ishin-gun would successfully defend their titles versus former champions Fuyuki-gun. On April 1st, Ultimo Dragon would successfully defend the NWA World Middleweight Championship versus the Ultimate Dragon. War would introduce a new championship belt. This was the War International Junior Heavyweight Championship. Much like the 6-man championships, it would be a one-night tournament. Round 1 would see Gedo beat Yuji Yasuraoka. The 1-2-3 Kid from the WWF would beat Negro Casas. Lionheart would beat Masao Orihara. And in the final first-round match, Ultimo Dragon would beat the Ultimate Dragon. The semifinals would see Gedo beat the 1-2-3 Kid, and Lionheart would beat Ultimo Dragon. In the finals, Gedo would be crowned the first ever War International Junior Heavyweight Champion after beating Lionheart. On that same card, Genichiro Tenryu would defeat the WWF's Yokozuna. In April, Gedo would get his first successful title defense, defeating Masao Orihara. Also that night, Heisei Ishin-gun would successfully defend their titles versus Genichiro Tenryu, Animal Hamaguchi, and Koki Kitahara. In April of 1995, Gedo would once again have a successful title defense versus Masao Orihara. The main event that night would see Genichiro Tenryu, Animal Hamaguchi, and Koki Kitahara beat Heisei Ishin-gun to win the War World 6-man tag team titles. If you're not familiar with Animal Hamaguchi, he was a massive star in the 70s for IWE. In June of 1995, Lionheart would capture the War International Junior Heavyweight title, beating Gedo. Tenryu, Hamaguchi, and Kitahara would have their first successful 6-man tag title defense versus Heisei Ishin-gun in a rematch. On the anniversary tour, Ultimo Dragon would successfully defend the NWA World Middleweight title once again versus Lionheart. Also, Genichiro Tenryu, Animal Hamaguchi, and Koki Kitahara would make a second title defense of the War 6-man titles versus Fuyuki-gun. The champions would successfully defend. On the final day of the anniversary tour, Lionheart would successfully defend his International Junior Heavyweight title versus Ultimo Dragon. These two would rematch on July 28, 1995. This time, Ultimo Dragon would get the win, and he would be crowned the new War International Junior Heavyweight Champion. On August 5th, 1995, Fuyuki-gun would become 3-time War World 6-man tag team champions, ending the reign of Genichiro Tenryu, Animal Hamaguchi, and Koki Kitahara. On August 29th, 1995, Gedo would become a two-time War International Junior Heavyweight Champion after he beat Ultimo Dragon. Fuyuki-gun would not hold the six-man tag titles for very long, as they would lose those titles on October 4th to Arashi, Koki Kitahara, and Nobutaka Araya.